delay, and welcome to the press briefing with Ms. Reem Alsalem, the Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and Girls, its causes and its consequences. The Special Rapporteur is in New York because it's the annual session of the Third Committee. The Third Committee addresses issues of social development as well as human rights. In her briefing earlier, the Special Rapporteur spoke about the different manifestations of violence against women and girls in the context of surrogacy. And to reiterate, the Special Rapporteur, and this goes for all rapporteurs, are indeed independent experts and independent from the United Nations. We will begin with a few remarks from the expert and then open up for questions. Special Rapporteur, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Is it on? Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you very much for coming and for your interest in the report. As we know, surrogacy is frequently portrayed as a gesture of altruism or love, as an act of helping others to have a family, while also in most cases receiving fair compensation for such a sacrifice. However, what I'm saying in my report is that this image bears a little resemblance to the lived experience of women who become surrogate mothers and the children who are born through surrogacy, since the rights and well-being of these children is also subordinated to the adults' wishes, as well as the rights and safety and dignity of the surrogate mothers. So my report examines in detail the harms that both surrogate mothers and children suffer, and it looks at also the various approaches taken by states on the issue of surrogacy and their limitations and failures. And I have looked at the consequences of surrogacy from a human rights perspective. And I have reached the conclusion, in fact, that the consequences of surrogacy are so grave and harmful and result in large-scale violations of the human rights of surrogate mothers and their children, that surrogacy as a practice, as an industry, must be abolished. I also make some recommendations on how to get to that ultimate aim, which I will speak to shortly. First of all, as I said, the violence that surrogate mothers and girls are experiencing in surrogate arrangements takes many forms. I speak about the economic violence, psychological violence, physical and reproductive. And in fact, in many situations, the surrogate mothers experience life-threatening situations. They are trapped in situations of slavery and are also subjected to practices that can amount to torture and inhuman and degrading treatment. It is very telling that most surrogate mothers come actually from economically deprived backgrounds. They might also often come from places affected not just by poverty, but also conflict and war. And they often belong to groups that already face intersecting forms of discrimination already long before entering into surrogacy arrangements. So therefore, many of these women and girls see surrogacy as one of the few options available for them to provide for them and their family. And often the concept of consent is weaponized in order to justify the surrogacy industry, saying that it is these women and girls that consent fully and voluntarily to engage in surrogacy, and that we have to also respect the bodily autonomy and the decisions of these women and girls. However, as I also say in the report, consent is invalid when it is used to justify exploitation, abuse, and violence. I had in fact put together a separate guide on consent. I had made also a whole list of recommendations to states on how to deal with the issue of consent. So if we take into consideration the fact that, first of all, the vast majority of women and girls who do this are compelled by their economic and otherwise circumstances, the fact that most of them also sign contracts, have to sign contracts whereby they relinquish fundamental rights, sign contracts that relinquish also their rights over their newborn babies, compel them to make decisions that put them in danger, that also seriously affect their health, that forbid them from traveling, that also control their everyday aspects of their life, then we cannot really speak about meaningful consent. Not to mention that many of these women are actually not aware of the harm that they're about to experience before entering into surrogacy arrangements, don't even necessarily understand the contracts and the details of it. And there is a wide imbalance and an asymmetry of power between these women and the surrogacy agencies and the commissioning parents. What we know is, of course, that the commissioning parents are almost always more affluent and have also more economic means. So that also contributes to the imbalance of power. What I also speak about is in particular, is the harmful psychological consequences for surrogate mothers. As I said, many of them are not aware about what they are about to endure. And one specific aspect of surrogacy really, let's say, causes that, which is the forced separation from the child immediately after the child is born. That has been proven to cause deep trauma, feelings of loss, and long-term emotional distress. So that is something that comes across very strongly. Not to mention that both women and children are also experience heightened risk of human trafficking, and the commodification of mothers and children, the commodification of the reproductive functions of surrogate mothers is also deeply dehumanizing. In fact, even the terminology that we use, describing them as ovens, describing them as gestators, describing them as wombs to rent, points to this also deep-seated sexism and dehumanization that facilitates the surrogacy industry. I also explore in a lot of detail the harms experienced by children born through surrogacy, also very clearly through the experience of immediate separation from the woman that carried them, which is really the only mother they knew for 9 months. And I point to extensive scientific evidence that confirm the harm caused when you break the maternal bond, so the bond that the newborn child has with the mother that gave birth, and the immense biological and emotional harm that is caused, including on a healthy development of the child. These include, for example, higher rates of preterm birth, low birth weight, and by coming into the world, these children, of course, through no fault of their own, will almost always find themselves in very risky and vulnerable situations. First of all, there are hardly any background checks on commissioning parents. These background checks are typically non-existent or minimal, because what matters is the buying powers of the commissioning parents, the lack of safeguards. If there are safeguards or lack of laws in a country, then commissioning parents and surrogacy agencies will flock to these locations. And many of them might be abandoned upon birth, either because the situation of the commissioning parents change, or because there is some issue that commissioning parents, some concern that they have about the child. They find themselves in situations of statelessness. They can also be forcefully or arbitrarily terminated while they are in the womb of their mothers, because of course commissioning parents have complete control over whether the mother, the surrogate mother, can carry this this child to term, or whether she should abort him. And abortion can be imposed even if there is nothing wrong actually with the life of or with the health of the baby or any other issues. So the main point also I make is that regulation and legalization have not proven to reduce demand. They have not proven to safeguard surrogate mothers and children against abuse and exploitation. On the contrary, from the little evidence we have of countries which regularize some forms of surrogacy, it actually leads to increased demand. It leads to also an increased commodification and harmful stereotypes about women and girls, about their reproductive functions, and therefore it also increases the risks of further abuse and exploitations. And therefore what I'm suggesting is, given the many similarities between the system of surrogacy and the system of prostitution, I believe that we need a differentiated approach or model to dealing with surrogacy. That mirrors what we call the Nordic/abolitionist model for prostitution. So what I'm proposing is a model that must include the following components. First of all, we must end the demand for surrogacy. And to end the demand, we must criminalize the purchase of children through surrogacy. So that means commissioning parents. It means also anyone who profiteers from the surrogacy industry, which is the clinics, which is the intermediaries. And we must also, therefore, prohibit advertisements that encourage and groom women and girls to become surrogate mothers or to sell even their eggs. So that is like one major component. The other thing is, as I said, most of the women that enter into the surrogacy industry are women that are compelled by their circumstances, are not aware of the harms that they will endure, and belong to groups of women that are already extremely marginalized and discriminated against. So these women are victims. They should not be criminalized for engaging in surrogacy. They must be treated as victims. What does that mean? We must provide victims always of violence with targeted support, so access to health services, legal aid, reparations, access to justice. They must also be helped to exit any dependence on the surrogacy industry. And I have to say that this also throws the onus of responsibility back on the state, because the states must take care of their most vulnerable populations, and we must not allow states to relinquish this responsibility by asking the victims of violence and victims of abuse and those that are most marginalized to fend for themselves and to survive via exploitative methods. And then we also have to raise awareness and in society about the harms of the surrogacy industry. And we have to educate also all actors about the rights and responsibilities if a Nordic model is adopted. As I said, I believe that ultimately we should abolish surrogacy. But to get there, of course, I realize that this is not something, first of all, that is going to happen overnight. Also because our starting point is really very, very low, in the sense that until today, in fact, or until this week, there has been no report that examines the human rights consequences of surrogacy. This is the first report that looks at all the consequences. Second, there is no platform, actually, intergovernmental platform to date, where states can come together, including other stakeholders that are monitoring or examining this issue, in order to share information, in order to discuss the concerns about the harms of this industry, and in order to come together to prevent further harm and to deal with the best assistance and protection and support that can be provided to victims. And we could and should start with the issues on which there is consensus or appetite by states, that these are issues that they want to work on. And I think one of those issues, as we heard also in the hall today, is there is wide recognition that many children born through surrogacy, for example, continue to face harm and abuse. And therefore, I believe that at least with that issue, there would be eagerness and interest to work on this issue. I have encouraged the members of the General Assembly to perhaps have one or two or more states step forward in order to lead such work and to establish such a platform. Because right now the matter is dealt with really on a national basis as an internal issue. And we have wide discrepancy in policies between states. And this wide discrepancy is actually one of the reasons why also there are many loopholes, and why those shopping around for the least expensive option can actually continue to do that and create and get away with abuse and exploitation. So that is that. And I also think we need to collect more data. We need to really mainstream the monitoring and the evaluation of the consequences of surrogacy. So we have to collect data. We have to reach out to victims, whether it's surrogate mothers or children. We have to collect testimonies, and we have to also sensitize human rights mechanisms to this issue. They have to address it in their work. So regional and international human rights mechanisms dealing with children and women have to really start looking at this and mainstream this in their work and their reports. And we have to also make sure that the justice system, the law enforcement systems are also sensitized to this specific phenomenon and know what to look for, and also develop approaches to, again, at least in the first stage, prevent further abuse and exploitation. So I will stop here, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Special Rapporteur. We will now open for questions, if there's any questions in the room or online. Please go ahead. If you can say your name and the organisation you're with. Thank you.
Thank you for Madam Alsalem. Thank you, Madam Alsalem, for hosting this press briefing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Yun Zhaopan from Xinhua News Agency of China.
Okay.
Do you have the figures that how many babies are born through surrogates each year?
Mm-hmm. In fact, I don't. And one of the reasons that we don't is, as I said, the vast majority of countries are silent. Their legal frameworks are silent on the issue of surrogacy. So while they are silent, this is actually an invitation, has been an invitation to becoming surrogacy destinations. Because, as I said, there's very little safeguards, there's hardly any monitoring, any examination of background checks on the commissioning parents. What matters are really, in such situations, that two elements primarily come together. One is that the commissioning parents can pay, and second, that they are able to identify a woman or a girl that is willing to be a surrogate mother. Other than that, really, there's very little else that needs to come together. And this is precisely why I think we need to start talking about this. Also, many of the victims of surrogacy, women and children, are too afraid to come forward and say that they've been involved. For the mothers, is as we said, it's the issue of the contracts, the red tape, the asymmetry of power, their fear that there will be very serious consequences, either by the clinics or by the commissioning parents. Some of them are also physically unable to take any action, because we know that there are in some countries literally surrogacy farms where women are kept in bondage or slavery-like situations and exploited day in, day out, until maybe one day, you know, the law enforcement happens to get intel and crack down on that. And this, by the way, happens also in countries which either criminalize it or regularize surrogacy. And the other more important issue is that the vast majority of surrogate children or children born through surrogacy are not aware that they were born through surrogacy, because their commissioning parents don't share that information with them. They remain ignorant of the fact that there is another mother that bore birth to them. They don't know about their identity. And they are also very scared about the implications of coming forward on their existing life, on their relations with the community or the family that they have. And other reasons. So if I think what we know from the little that we know, it's only the tip of the iceberg. In fact, there is so much more that we don't know. Please. Yeah.
Sorry. This year marks the 30th anniversary of the Fourth World Conference on Women.
Yes.
And in a few days, another global summit of women will be held in Beijing.
Yes.
So do you have any expectations for this summit? And what do you think that this summit will help to address violence against women and girls?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So look, as I said in the commemoration of the fourth Women Conference in Beijing, the Beijing Declaration Platform of Action was incredibly visionary for its time. It was and remains a very important blueprint that very comprehensively addressed the issues of discrimination and violence against women, but also a roadmap for achieving the advancement of women, their empowerment, their equal inclusion in policies. It addressed also states on how to design really comprehensive sex and gender sensitive policies. So I think it speaks for itself, the fact that 30 years on, Beijing Declaration remains very relevant. And I have said that, in fact, we should go back to really understanding and incorporating and following what the Beijing Declaration and Platform of Action have laid out for us. So that is what I would say today, that we have to go back to the basics that were laid out there and reaffirm our commitment to the Beijing Declaration, particularly since it addressed issues that are today missing from our vocabulary and that states perhaps want to forget. One is the fact that it still recognizes the centrality of sex as biological sex, as a factor on which women are discriminated against, and human dignity, including the dignity of women. So, and also the need for international solidarity. So there are these issues that it highlighted, and it also spoke to how there are other causes of violence other than the family or the state, which we are seeing very much today, which is occupation, foreign aggression. It spoke about also climate change. So, as I said, it was very, very visionary. So we should just go back to it and see how we can reaffirm our engagement with it.
Thank you, Ms. Reem. And I am Minglu from China Daily. And 30 years ago, in Beijing Declaration and the Platform for Action, it also emphasized that the freedom of women for free reproductive right.
Yes.
And so 30 years has been passed. And what progress do you see in developing countries such as China has been doing in advancing women's rights and protection from the violence, and what are the key areas that we as a global community still need to work on?
You mean in general or on reproductive rights?
In general.
In general. Yeah, that's. So look, it's clear. I think that we are seeing a very serious regression in the rights of equal rights of women and girls in realizing gender equality. I would say that in particular we see this in countries that are affected by crisis and conflict because of this massive blow that has been dealt to the respect for international humanitarian law. It governs also the safety and protection of civilians, and also the specific, let's say, protections that women and girls require. And we see the consequences of that already reverberating throughout the world. I think all red lines were crossed, as I've said multiple times, in Gaza. And the consequences of that we are seeing also in other conflicts. So since we are also celebrating, or I would say commemorating, the 25th anniversary of the Women, Peace and Security, there is really a need to reverse this appalling disregard for international human rights law and international law. I also think that we have seen emerging forms of violence fueled by patriarchy and sexism that I think the international community has been very slow to acknowledge and to understand and to respond to. And one of those that we, I think, all agree on is that perpetrated through digital technologies. Girls in particular, I would say, right now face the horrendous reality of constantly being sexualized and groomed and also attacked online. Women also that are very visible in their societies. And the national and international frameworks to respond to that have been extremely slow. And then we have also other issues, like I think, for example, surrogacy, and this is why I chose this subject, is also a form of, human rights violation in general, gender-based violence against women and girls, but it's also a form of reproductive violence. And until, let's say, very recently, we haven't even discussed it. We haven't looked at the specific impact and consequences for women and girls. So we find constantly loopholes where women and girls continue to face violence and new forms of violence. At the same time, I'm not somebody who looks at the glass only half full, or that is that suggests that the situation is only doom and gloom, because on the other hand, there has been progress also done in a number of areas, and we must recognize that. So when it comes to recognizing, the gendered impact of the care economy on women, there are many states that are also adopting policies to be, more fair towards women. The issue of economic empowerment, many countries have also taken steps on this, and we know that economically empowered women also increases their safety from abuse and exploitation. Their participation in politics, we've seen also notable increase in a number of countries, women parliamentarians, women in leadership positions politically. So there are, of course, also advances. But if we look at the overall balance, it's very concerning. Yeah.
I don't see any questions online. If there are no more follow-ups in the room, I think we will close the briefing, and thank you very much, Special Rapporteur, for your
Thank
time
you.
and for the briefing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your interest also. All right. Thank you, Luis.
Thank you.